I spent 11 months building the largest software migration project our company had ever seen. I stayed late every night, worked through weekends, missed my gym sessions. I created every spreadsheet, every timeline, every contingency plan. The board loved my work. Our investors praised the structure. Then, on a Tuesday morning, my boss called an emergency meeting with 37 people in the conference room. He stood at the front with his laptop connected to the projector. He opened my shared drive, and he deleted every single file I had created, one by one, while looking directly at me. Then he turned to the room and said I was too emotional and theatrical to handle real business. He mocked the way I spoke, the way I moved my hands. He said the company needed someone stable, not someone who brought drama. Everyone watched in silence. Nobody defended me. And in that moment, I realized something. He had just made the biggest mistake of his career. I arrived that morning expecting a normal project update. Instead, I walked into a room full of colleagues and executives. My boss stood at the front with a strange smile. He said he needed to show everyone something important about project management. Then he opened my files and started deleting them, one folder at a time. One detail. If you've ever felt judged just for being who you are, or know someone who has gone through this, the story will touch you. Want to follow it to the end. Subscribe and help give voice to stories that should no longer remain silent. My name is Oliver Bennett, and I work in software implementation for a mid-sized tech firm in Manchester. I have been with the company for 6 years. I started as a junior analyst and worked my way up to senior project manager. I am good at my job. Very good. I understand systems, timelines, and people. I know how to make complicated projects work. But being gay in a traditional corporate environment means I have always had to prove myself twice as hard as everyone else. The microaggressions started years ago. Small comments about my voice being too soft. Jokes about the way I dressed. Colleagues would mimic my hand gestures during meetings and laugh. When I spoke in presentations, some of the older managers would exchange looks. They never said anything directly, but I felt it. The judgment. The assumption that I was less capable because of who I was. I learned to keep my personal life private. I never mentioned my boyfriend, Daniel. I avoided talking about my weekend. I kept my desk clear of personal photos. I thought if I just focused on my work, if I delivered exceptional results, none of the rest would matter. I was wrong. Daniel and I met 2 years ago at a charity event in the city center. He works in urban planning for the council. He is kind, intelligent, and supportive. He understood the pressure I faced at work. He never pushed me to be more open about our relationship. He just supported me quietly. We lived together in a small flat in Coralton. Our life was simple and happy. At work, I had one close friend, Sarah, who worked in the finance department. She was the only person who knew about Daniel. We would have coffee together in the mornings, and she would listen when I needed to talk. She understood what it felt like to be different in a conservative workplace. She was one of the few women in senior management, and she faced her own battles. Everything changed when our company won a contract with a major European bank. They needed to migrate their entire customer database to a new system. The project was worth millions. It required careful planning, coordination across multiple countries, and flawless execution. Our managing director, Richard Hartley, announced that he needed someone to lead the project. Someone detail-oriented, someone who could handle complexity. I spent 3 weeks preparing my proposal. I researched every aspect of the migration. I built detailed timelines, risk assessments, and communication plans. I presented my proposal to the board, and they were impressed. Richard approved my appointment as project lead. It was the biggest opportunity of my career. But my direct supervisor, James Crawford, was not happy. James had been with the company for 15 years. He was old school, traditional, and openly uncomfortable around me. He never said anything explicitly homophobic, but his discomfort was obvious. He would avoid eye contact, keep conversations brief, and position himself physically away from me in meetings. When I got the project lead position, James became cold. He stopped responding to my emails promptly. He questioned my decisions in front of other team members. He would schedule meetings without inviting me, then act surprised when I asked about them. Sarah noticed the change immediately. She told me to be careful, that James was threatened by my success. The project started in January. I assembled a team of 12 people. We worked closely with the European Bank's IT department. The migration involved moving data for over 3 million customers. One mistake could cause massive problems. I created systems to track every single step. I built redundancy into every process. I documented everything meticulously. I worked 12-hour days. I came in early and stayed late. I took work home on weekends. Daniel started complaining that he never saw me. I missed dinners, canceled plans, and fell asleep on the sofa with my laptop. But I knew this project could change my career. If I succeeded, I would prove that I belonged at the senior level, that I was just as capable as anyone else. The bank representatives loved my work. They told Richard that I was the most organized project manager they had ever worked with. They praised my communication skills and attention to detail. Richard started inviting me to executive meetings. He introduced me to potential investors. For the first time in my career, I felt truly valued. But the more successful I became, the worse James treated me. He started making comments about my presentation style. He said I was too theatrical, too expressive. He told me to tone it down in client meetings. He suggested I needed to be more masculine if I wanted to be taken seriously at the senior level. When I pushed back, he said he was just trying to help me succeed. The comments escalated. During one team meeting, James interrupted my presentation to say that clients preferred working with more traditional managers. He said my style was fine for internal work, but external relationships required a different approach. Several people in the room looked uncomfortable, but nobody said anything. I felt my face burn with humiliation, but I finished my presentation professionally. Sarah was furious when I told her. She said James was creating a hostile work environment. She encouraged me to report him to human resources, but I was afraid. I had seen what happened to people who complained. They got labeled as troublemakers. Their careers stalled. I decided to focus on delivering excellent work instead. I thought my results would speak for themselves. By July, the project was ahead of schedule. We had completed the first major phase of the migration without any significant problems. The bank was thrilled. They started talking about expanding our contract. Richard told me I was doing an outstanding job. He hinted that a promotion might be coming. I allowed myself to hope that maybe things were finally changing. Daniel noticed the difference, and I was happier, more confident. We started planning a holiday for after the project finished. We talked about finally being more open about our relationship. Maybe even moving to a bigger flat. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. But James was planning something. I did not know it then, but he was building a case against me. He was documenting every small mistake, every delayed email response, every meeting that ran long. He was preparing to destroy everything I had built. In August, the European Bank offered us an extension contract worth £4 million. They wanted us to handle their entire digital transformation project. It was massive. It would secure our company's position in the market for years. Richard was ecstatic. He told the board that this was the biggest opportunity in the company's history. The bank had one condition. They wanted me to lead the project. They specifically requested me by name. They said my work on the migration had been exceptional, and they trusted me to handle the larger transformation. Richard called me into his office and told me the news. He said I had earned this opportunity, that the company was counting on me. I was overwhelmed. This was beyond anything I had imagined. A £4 million project with my name attached to it. Daniel was so proud when I told him. We celebrated that night with champagne in our tiny flat. For once, I felt like all the sacrifice had been worth it. But James was livid. I heard through Sarah that he had gone to Richard and argued that he should lead the project instead. He said I was too inexperienced for something this large, that the company was taking a huge risk by putting a junior manager in charge of such an important contract. Richard apparently told him that the client specifically wanted me, and that was final. The next day, James called me into his office. He said we needed to discuss the project structure. He told me that while I would be the official project lead, he would need to oversee all my decisions. He said he wanted daily reports, approval on all communications, and veto power over major decisions. He said this was for my own protection, that he was trying to help me succeed. I knew what he was really doing. He was trying to control the project, to take credit for the success while positioning me to take the blame for any failures. I told him I would discuss the structure with Richard. James's face hardened. He said I was being difficult and ungrateful, that I should appreciate his guidance instead of fighting it. I went to Richard that afternoon. I explained that James wanted to micromanage the project despite the client specifically requesting my leadership. Richard looked uncomfortable. He said James was a valued senior member of the team and that collaboration was important. He suggested we find a middle ground. I left his office feeling betrayed. The project kicked off in September. The bank sent a team of executives to Manchester for the initial planning sessions. I had prepared extensive presentations, budget forecasts, and timeline projections. James insisted on attending every meeting. He would interrupt my presentations to add commentary. He would position himself at the head of the table even though I was the project lead. The bank representatives noticed. After one particularly awkward meeting, the bank's chief technology officer pulled me aside. He asked if there was a problem with the project leadership. I assured him everything was fine, that James was just providing support. But I could see the concern in his eyes. Daniel noticed I was stressed again. I was working even longer hours than before. James demanded those daily reports, which took me an hour to prepare each evening. He would send them back with extensive comments and criticisms. He questioned every decision I made. He second-guessed my timelines, my budgets, my team selections. Sarah warned me that James was setting me up to fail. She said he was creating a paper trail that made me look incompetent. She showed me emails he had sent to other managers, raising concerns about my ability to handle the project. He was subtle about it, framing his comments as concern rather than criticism. But the message was clear. He did not think I could do the job. I started keeping my own documentation. I saved every email, every meeting note, every piece of positive feedback from the client. I created backup copies of all my project files. I stored everything in multiple locations, including my personal cloud storage. Something told me I would need evidence later. By October, James's behavior became more aggressive. He started making comments about my personal life. He asked pointed questions about my weekends, my social activities. He made jokes about interior design and fashion, looking at me when he said them. Other team members became uncomfortable, but nobody confronted him. The breaking point came during a review meeting with the bank's executive team. We were presenting our progress on the first phase of the transformation project. I had prepared detailed reports showing we were on track and under budget. The bank representatives were pleased. Then James interrupted. He told the bank team that while the numbers looked good, he had concerns about project sustainability. He said I was working unsustainable hours and that he worried about burnout. He suggested bringing in additional senior management to share the load. The bank's CTO looked confused. He said I seemed perfectly capable and that the project was running smoothly. James persisted. He said the company wanted to ensure the project's success, and that meant having experienced oversight. The bank's CTO finally said that they had specifically chosen me because of my expertise, and that they were satisfied with my leadership. James smiled tightly and dropped the subject. But the damage was done. He had planted doubt. After the meeting, I confronted James. I asked him why he was undermining me in front of the client. He acted innocent. He said he was just being cautious, protecting the company's interests. I told him his behavior was inappropriate and damaging. He leaned back in his chair and said something I will never forget. He said maybe I was too sensitive for senior management, that maybe I took things too personally, that successful leaders needed thicker skin. I knew what he meant. He was calling me weak, emotional, using coded language to attack my identity without saying anything explicitly discriminatory. I left his office shaking with anger. That night, I told Daniel everything. He was furious. He said I needed to report James to Human Resources, that his behavior was creating a hostile work environment. But I was afraid. The project was at a critical stage. If I made a formal complaint, it could jeopardize everything. I decided to wait until after the first major milestone was complete, just a few more weeks. I should have acted sooner. November started badly. James scheduled a major project review meeting without consulting me. He invited 37 people, the entire project team, senior management, the board of directors, and representatives from the bank. He sent the invitation late on a Friday afternoon, scheduling the meeting for Monday morning. He copied me on the email, but did not ask for my input. I spent the entire weekend preparing. I updated all the project reports, created new presentations, and compiled evidence of our progress. Daniel barely saw me. I worked through Saturday and Sunday, surviving on coffee and anxiety. I knew something was wrong. James never scheduled meetings without an agenda, but I had no choice except to attend and present my work. Monday morning arrived cold and gray. I got to the office an hour early to set up the conference room. The space was large, with a long table and chairs for 40 people. Windows overlooked the Manchester skyline. I connected my laptop to the projector and tested all the presentations. Everything was ready. People started arriving at 9. The room filled quickly. Sarah caught my eye from across the room and gave me a concerned look. Richard sat at the head of the table with the board members. The bank's representatives sat together on one side. My team members found seats around the edges. James arrived last, carrying his laptop and a folder of papers. He stood at the front of the room and thanked everyone for coming. He said he needed to address some serious concerns about the project. My stomach dropped. He said that recent audits had revealed significant problems with project management, documentation, and financial controls. He said the company needed to take immediate action to protect the contract. I tried to interrupt, to ask what he was talking about. He held up his hand and told me to wait. He connected his laptop to the projector. My presentation disappeared from the screen, replaced by his desktop. He opened our shared network drive where I stored all my project files. Every document I had created over the past 11 months was there. Hundreds of files organized in careful folders. James started talking about project documentation standards. He said proper file management was essential for corporate governance. Then he started deleting my files. One by one, folders disappeared as he clicked through them. Client contracts, meeting notes, financial projections, timeline spreadsheets, risk assessments, everything I had built. I stood up and demanded to know what he was doing. He turned to face the room and said he was demonstrating the problem. He said my file organization was chaotic and unprofessional, that I had failed to follow company standards, that I had created a documentation mess that put the entire project at risk. He continued deleting files while he talked. The room was silent. 37 people watched as he destroyed my work. Sarah looked horrified. Richard looked confused. The bank representatives were staring at James with obvious shock. My team members would not meet my eyes. Then James switched tactics. He said the documentation problems were just symptoms of a larger issue. He said I lacked the temperament for senior leadership. He turned to face me directly. He said I was too emotional, too theatrical. He mimicked the way I speak, raising his voice and making exaggerated hand gestures. He said clients needed to work with stable, professional managers, not people who brought drama and instability to business relationships. Several people in the room gasped. Sarah started to say something, but James spoke over her. He said the company had tried to support me, but I was not suited for the role. He said they needed to replace me with someone more appropriate, someone who could represent the company properly. I felt like I could not breathe. The humiliation was complete. He had destroyed my work and mocked my identity in front of everyone who mattered. He had reduced 11 months of exceptional work to a joke about my mannerisms, and nobody was stopping him. Richard finally spoke. He asked James if this was really necessary. James said it was. He said the board needed to understand the severity of the situation. He said personnel changes needed to happen immediately. He had already prepared the paperwork. He handed Richard a folder. That was when I realized the full scope of his plan. He was not just undermining me. He was firing me. He had orchestrated this entire meeting to publicly destroy my reputation and justify my termination. And he had done it in front of the client to make reversing the decision impossible. I walked out of the conference. I could not stay there another second. I heard voices behind me, but I kept walking. I went to my desk, grabbed my coat and bag, and left the building. I walked for an hour through the city streets, not really seeing anything. My phone kept ringing, but I did not answer. I finally ended up at a coffee shop in the northern quarter. I sat in the back corner and tried to process what had happened. My career was destroyed. My reputation was ruined. James had won. And he had done it by attacking who I was, not just my work. Daniel found me there 2 hours later. Sarah had called him. He sat down across from me and just held my hand. He did not say anything at first. He just waited. Finally, I told him everything. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he said one thing. "You keep copies?" That was when I remembered. The backups. The personal cloud storage. The documentation I had saved. I pulled out my phone and checked. Everything was there. Every file James had deleted. Every email exchange. Every piece of evidence showing my work quality and his interference. All of it safely stored outside the company system. Daniel smiled. He said James had just made a catastrophic mistake. He had deleted company files in front of witnesses, including client representatives. He had publicly discriminated against me based on my identity. And I had proof that those files contained legitimate, valuable work product. We had him. I felt something shift inside me. The humiliation was still there. The pain was still real. But underneath it, I felt something else. Determination. James thought he had destroyed me. He had no idea what was coming. I did not go back to the office that day. Instead, I went home with Daniel and started organizing my evidence. I had everything. 11 months of emails showing James's interference, his undermining comments, his attempts to take credit for my work. I had the client feedback praising my performance. I had the original project proposals with my name on them. I had the contract extension request specifically asking for my leadership. And I had complete backups of every file James had deleted. Daniel helped me create a timeline. We documented every instance of discrimination, every hostile comment, every act of sabotage. We organized everything into a clear, irrefutable narrative. Then Daniel made a call to his friend Marcus, who worked as an employment solicitor in the city center. Marcus came to our flat that evening. He reviewed everything I had. He asked detailed questions about the meeting, about witnesses, about company policies. When I finished explaining, he sat back and smiled. He said I had one of the strongest employment discrimination cases he had ever seen. Public humiliation based on sexual orientation, destruction of work product, wrongful termination. And I had documented everything perfectly. He explained my options. I could file a formal complaint with the company and hope they handled it properly. Or I could bypass them entirely and go straight to legal action. He recommended the second approach. He said companies like mine often protected senior managers at the expense of younger employees. A legal letter would force them to take the situation seriously. That night, I could not sleep. I kept replaying the meeting in my mind. The way James had smiled while deleting my files. The silence from everyone else in the room. The humiliation of being mocked in front of 37 people. But I also thought about what came next. The power I now held. The evidence I possessed. The case Marcus said was unbeatable. The next morning, Marcus sent a formal letter to my company's legal department. It detailed every instance of discrimination and harassment. It described the public destruction of my work and the discriminatory comments. It included timestamps, witnesses, and documentation. And it made a demand, reinstatement to my position, full back pay, compensation for emotional distress, and James's immediate termination. If they refused, we would file a formal lawsuit and contact the client directly about the mismanagement. The response came within 3 hours. The company's solicitor called Marcus and asked for an urgent meeting. Marcus said no, he told them to respond in writing. They did. They admitted that the meeting had been inappropriate. They offered a settlement, 6 months' salary, a positive reference, and a confidentiality agreement. Marcus forwarded me the offer with one word: insulting. I told him to reject it. I wanted more than money. I wanted accountability. I wanted James to face consequences. I wanted the client to know what had really happened. Marcus sent a counter-proposal: 12 months' salary, full project credit on my CV, a public apology, James's termination, and no confidentiality clause. He gave them 24 hours to respond. He also mentioned that we had already prepared a full disclosure package for the European bank, ready to send if negotiations failed. That threat worked. The bank was their biggest client. If the bank learned that the company had sabotaged their preferred project manager because of discrimination, they would pull the contract immediately. The company could not afford that risk. The solicitor called Marcus back within an hour. They agreed to everything except James's termination. They would suspend him pending investigation. Marcus said no, either James goes or we go public. They asked for time to consult with the board. While we waited, something unexpected happened. Sarah called me. She said the bank's CTO had contacted Richard directly, demanding an explanation for what happened in the meeting. The bank representatives had been shocked by James's behavior. They had already filed a formal complaint with the company. They said if I was not reinstated immediately, they would consider terminating the contract. The bank had also done something else. They had offered me a contract directly. They wanted to hire me as an independent consultant to finish the project. They would pay me £75,000 for the completion work, plus a £20,000 signing bonus. The offer was contingent on me having full ownership of the project documentation and methodology, the same documentation James had tried to destroy. I called Marcus immediately. He said this changed everything. I no longer needed the company. I could take the bank's offer and walk away with £95,000. The company would lose their biggest client. James would be exposed as the person who cost them millions, and I would have complete vindication. I accepted the bank's offer that afternoon. I sent a formal notice to my former employer, declining their settlement and resigning effective immediately. I attached a detailed account of James's behavior with full documentation. I sent copies to Richard, the board, and the Human Resources Department. I did not ask for anything. I just made sure everyone knew exactly what had happened. Then I sent the project files to the bank. Everything James had deleted. Complete, organized, professional. Exactly as I had maintained them. The bank's CTO sent me a message saying I had saved them from a disaster. He said they had been right to trust me. The fallout was immediate. Richard called me personally, apologizing profusely. He said the board had reviewed the evidence and terminated James immediately. He said they wanted to make things right to offer me a better settlement. I told him I was no longer interested. I was moving forward with the bank as my direct client. Sarah told me later that the office was in chaos. James had been escorted out by security. Several other managers had resigned in protest of how the situation was handled. The bank had formally notified the company that they would not renew any contracts unless significant leadership changes were made. The company's reputation was damaged, possibly permanently. I started working directly with the bank the following week. They set me up with a home office arrangement and full support. I rebuilt the project team with people I trusted, bringing in contractors and specialists. We completed the transformation project 3 months ahead of schedule. The bank was so impressed that they offered me a permanent consulting contract worth £200,000 annually. Daniel was incredible through everything. He supported me emotionally, helped me stay focused, and celebrated every victory. When the bank offered me the permanent contract, we finally took that holiday we had planned. We went to Portugal for 2 weeks. We did not talk about work once. The £95,000 from the bank cleared into my account exactly 2 weeks after I left the company. I remember checking my banking app and seeing the amount. It felt surreal. I had gone from publicly humiliated and fired to financially secure and professionally vindicated in less than a month. Looking back now, I understand that what James did to me was not just about one project or one job. It was about power and prejudice. He could not accept that someone like me could be better at the job than he was. He could not tolerate my success because it challenged his assumptions about who belonged in leadership. So he tried to destroy me. He thought that public humiliation would break me, that mocking my identity would make me disappear quietly. He was wrong. The prejudice I faced taught me to be strategic, to document everything, to build systems that could not be easily destroyed. It taught me to trust my own abilities even when others questioned them. And it taught me that sometimes the best response to discrimination is not confrontation, but preparation. I did not win by being louder or angrier. I won by being smarter. By having evidence, by having alternatives, by having allies like Daniel and Sarah who believed in me. The £95,000 was never just about money. It was proof that my work had real value. That I had real value. That no amount of prejudice could erase what I had built. I'm still in touch with the bank. The project I led became a case study in successful digital transformation. My name is on it. My methods are documented. My contribution is recognized. James lost everything. His reputation, his job, his credibility. Not because I destroyed him, but because he destroyed himself. Prejudice always does that eventually. It makes people stupid and reckless. I hope my story reminds others who face similar situations that documentation is power. That building relationships with clients and allies matters. That your talent and hard work cannot be deleted by someone else's bigotry. And that sometimes walking away with your dignity and your bank account full is the sweetest victory of all. If my story inspired you, if you have ever felt diminished or know someone who has, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Here, we share real stories of overcoming and resistance. And if you have your own story of triumph against prejudice, share it in the comments. Your experience can inspire someone going through a similar situation. Remember, your value is not defined by others' prejudice. Your talent is greater than any barrier they try to put in your way. And sometimes the best revenge is simply being who you are, without apologizing. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next story, which will be even more impactful.